Hello and welcome everyone to another interview we have this time. I'm going to ask you to do a very simple activity. Okay, this is a metaphor I'm going to give you. Imagine an organization, a company that you really like. It could be a large one, it could be a small one, it could be a startup, just or an academic organization. Think about that. Equate that to a human body. Okay, so let's see if the organization is a human body. Okay, if it's a human body, what do you think are the different organs in the body equal to in the company? Just think about it. Okay, so you can pause the video if you want. So the first one probably you say is, oh, the executives or the decision making are up at the brain, and so on and so forth. Heart is this and that, innovation, products, all that you will do. Perfect. Now, question to you: what do you think is the equivalent of blood in an organization? What is the equivalent of blood in a human body inside an organization? Perfect. Some of you got it. It is probably money, the finances. Okay, it's for me. It's as important as blood. Without blood, the body is. I mean, you'll find it very difficult to run something like our bodies, right? Same story with organization. Without cash flow, it's absolutely pretty much impossible to run a company, right? So, I'm very happy to introduce to you the guest of this session who will share his experiences on dealing with this bloodline inside a company, whose ample experience has worked with many companies of repute and made sure that they understand where the blood is flowing inside the company, the cash is flowing inside the company. I am very happy to introduce to you Venkatakrishnan Janakiraman, Venkat for short. He is with us. Say hello, Venkat.
Hi everyone, so good to be here.
Okay, so as always, we have Sukrat is going to be the primary interviewer. So he is the one who will lead the show. So to give a very sort of informal intro of Venkat, he started off, and we will discuss more details about his story of where he is, how did he get here. In dealing with companies cash flow, and how to make sure that they understand what's going on inside their own company. He started off in his own words a blog, a very popular. It became a very popular blog, and eventually, and correct me anywhere where I've got it wrong, Venkat. It became so serious, and people he realized that it's very important that they actually decided to make it a full-fledged company, and that company eventually became so big that another company said, oh, I'm very interested in this part, and they sort of took over along with we definitely want this along with Venkat, and they also had this. But Venkat had his own dreams, and which is what he's realizing right now with a company called Quark Cube. So we'll discuss the details, but just sort of a very brief overview of his history, so to speak. Sukrat, over to you if you want to add some more details from a standpoint of formality. He has your time.
So, as always, I'm back with the formal interviews. Hello again, I'm Sukrat. With us is Mr. Venkat. Mr. Venkat is the founder and CEO of QuarkCube. QuarkCube is a multi-dimensional data modeling and analysis platform. He and his team transform the way you plan, measure, and improve business performance. It's a delight and an honor to have you here with us, sir. I feel like the students that we deal with of data science and programming, for them you are one of the most relevant people that we could get on board and talk to. So I really hope that your expertise really helps them deciding and choosing what they do in the future. So welcome on board, sir.
Honored to be here. Thank you, Sukhilan.
Yeah. So, although I've made like a formal introduction of you and QuadCube, would you like to tell our viewers something about what you do or something about yourself?
Sure. Thank you again. Thanks again for the introduction, Sukhirat and Bala. As you mentioned, I'm the founder and CEO of QuadCube. So I've been in this industry, or I would say the finance space, for the last almost 18 years now. I started off just like you all. I think most of you are students, just sort of got out of college. I was actually with Cognizant for a couple of years, where I was doing services for pretty large groups like Hertz, Sendent, etc. Those are my clients where we were doing a bit more analytics related work. So then I moved away from services industry, then joined Oracle, which is more around the products. So that's when I actually got the analytics bug of building products, probably using products and then rolling out analytics related stuff for clients and customers. So then that's the journey. I think Bala was referring to blogs, etc. Correct. So that's during my stint at Oracle. I think it was a couple of years I was at Oracle. That's when I started writing about, hey, how can you make better use of the product? How can you get more value? And I started seeing a lot more. I mean, it was just that I wanted to share, but then it so happened that people started liking it. And then I also started, as more people started seeing it, I also got motivation to write more. It came to a point, I think I had close to around 400, 500 odd articles at one point in time. And that's when I realized, hey, there are so many people watching my blog. Why don't I then start something? So that's when my entrepreneurship bug actually bit me. And then I started the India operations of a company called Rickman Mead Consulting. So we were actually pretty well known in the Oracle Analytics space. We were an implementation partner. So we ended up rolling out solutions for a lot of customers, both India, US, and UK. So we were pretty well spread at that point in time. And then that's when actually till that time I used to do work more for clients outside India, say US, UK, etc. But then after I started the India operations of Rickman Mead, I started focusing on customers in India. And then that's when I slowly started how do I call it? Doing the transition from analytics to finance, where I started working more with customers. Then I realized, hey, analytics is great. I mean, people need to see the value out of data, but getting value out of data needs to have a direct business impact. And the more I started working with customers, the business impact is a lot more relevant in the area of finance. And Bala was referring to the point on blood, correct? So that's the lifeline of a company. That's eventually finance is what runs companies. If you can't manage your finance well, everything else sort of falls apart. And that's when we realized that analytics and finance go hand in hand and needs to work hand in hand. And then that's when as a company at Rickman Mead, we started focusing on a specific area called as enterprise performance management. So that's actually called as a top end of finance, where we start looking at cash flows. We start looking at how cash flows can be projected, how you can project your profitability itself. Say, for example, today we are going through a global turmoil, right? Oil prices change. There is quite a bit of foreign exchange change. All of them have eventual dovetail impact across a lot of these macroeconomic factors, and it eventually impacts our financial numbers. So how those impact our numbers, how they impact their shareholders, and that's when we started focusing more on the enterprise performance management. So till 2019, I was running Rickman Mead for 5 years. So then that's when we joined hands as India operations. We sold the company to Huron. So Huron is a public company management consulting firm because they wanted to come to India and grow more, expand more. So I was running Huron's operations in India for 5 years after, till I was in their board till last year. And another reason, and that's when again a startup bug sort of what hit me. And the primary reason is, I started moving into enterprise performance management space. Then I realized, hey, every company needs it. And most of the companies that we used to work for were always large enterprises. But then even as a startup, I run a startup today, correct? Every startup needs these fundamentals: cash flow management, profitability management. These are fundamentals. And in fact, they need it even more. And unfortunately, when I looked at quite a few, alternatives that are available for companies out there, there are not that many. In fact, even if you look at India, the number of companies focusing on enterprise performance management are very, very minimal, very limited. And that's when we thought there was an opportunity for me, for us at least, to start something and do something different and something which sort of bridges the gap between finance and analytics. And that's how QuadCube sort of got its initial incubation 2 years back, and here we are. I think so far it's been really, really good.
Okay. So, one of the first few things thank you so much for detailed introduction of yours. So, we really understand what you've been doing. So, one of the modules in design thinking is called empathize. So, empathize is where we socialize with people who are going through a certain experience and with a product, with a service, and try to figure out what is, from their point of view, what is it that's going on. Because they are not going to tell us what's really going on, because they are fine with the way they're leading. They've figured out this is how they lead their life. They live with problems, but only an external perspective of their life will give us those problems. But for that, to know what is the external perspective, we need the internal perspective. So we try to socialize. Now, oftentimes, and given the last the pandemic era where everybody is online and all that, we were struggling to find this internal view because we are not allowed to go physically and meet people. And one of the pillars of design thinking is actually go socialize physically. Now, you before all this, so a couple of decades ago, you did this empathize/socialize using blog. For me, that stood out completely. This is completely electronic, completely asynchronous, but you figured out what people needed. What's the secret sauce in this? How did you figure this out, that this is what is, and you had to build on it also? Can you explain to us what your process was in that?
Sure. I think it all started with a simple point where I remember once where, everything started. It used to be the case where, I think still companies do it. You had online forums, people used to have questions. And, most of the solutions today in problems is all Google search, correct? And in those days, Google search still was good. But then if you had a specific pointed question, you always need to go to a specific product vendor's forum, ask a specific question, and then you would have a whole bunch of community marshalling on that problem and trying to solve the problem. And that's how I started, where you actually look at where I started asking questions. Hey, how do I solve it? Then I realized there are so many people contributing. Now, then there is the same set of community starts coming in. They ask a question, then you contribute back. Then you realize you end up solving so many problems. And in that process, more than anything, you end up learning a lot more because it's basically you are trying to understand what somebody else is doing. And then I realized, hey, you're solving so many problems. Why can't you maybe write it in a way that people can even see it forever? Because forums, those posts get lost in that sort of specific area. I thought this could be a opportunity for me to first maybe document my thoughts. Maybe in that process, if people can search, they could see value in it. If so, they can use it. And then last part of it, when I started monetization or conversion to a way where I could use it for my own needs, was not even there. But the hardest part was writing the first 10 posts. Just getting the pen to paper was so hard, literally speaking, but it's so hard writing that. But then once you get into that mode, it becomes like an automatic cycle. It sort of works really well. And what you will see is you'll get the high of people seeing it, realizing value. And that's what you would eventually want, right? You would want people to be using, irrespective of what you get, you want more people to be seeing what you do, and most importantly, seeing value in it and using it for their own, at least day-to-day problems.
So, in design thinking, while talking about the concepts of design thinking, there is a phase which we enter, which is called iterations. Now, iterations happen when we sort of have a product which we want to test out, see what works, what doesn't work. So, your leadership stint and now the board position at Ritman Mead and Huron Consulting are somewhat stellar examples of iterations. So, what would you suggest that you've learned from that and that you're applying at QuarkCube?
Sure. There are two, I would say broad areas where I think I'll probably look at both Ritman Mead and Huron stint from that perspective. Is Ritman Mead, we were small, but then we had a large suite of clients, and there is tons of learning purely when it comes to customers, clients. How do you manage them? How do you make sure that they are successful? And then in the same process, you are also successful as well. And then also one of the other biggest learning for us is how do you work with the ecosystem of products, the partners, etc. While on the Huron stint, where it was a slightly different tangent altogether, where you have while we were still focused on customers, but then I started transitioning a bit more onto people side, because what was a 50 to 60 member organization to almost 500 member organization when I left Huron. So for me, the biggest learning was on the people side. How is it that you can still get value, you can still use larger pools of people, but still solving the same set of problems and perhaps even better. So bringing these two together was perhaps my biggest learning at these two places. And I'm hoping that is something which I've carried in building these products at QuarkCube.
Right. So when we conduct workshops, this is actually one of the main problem that we witness a lot. Is that when people are working in teams, maybe it's a team of 4, maybe it's a team of 8 or 10. Even in such smaller team, there are a lot of conflicts that happen amongst people. There is lack of coordination. So much goes on when you're working in a team. right? And you started off from 50 to 60 and progressed to 5 600 people working towards the same product, working towards the same solution, right? So there must be a lot of conflicts that come up. So how do you go about this collaborative version of work?
Perfect. I think this probably sort of resonates really, really well in terms of, I mean, in terms of even my entire journey has been. Generally, at least two mantras, generally, I always try to, irrespective of the kind of engagements we do. Some of the engagements we do are short term, so like say 2 months. Some of them go for 2.5 years transformation work. But eventually comes down to two fundamental principles, at least that's what I generally tend to use. Devil is in the detail. That is, do not, whenever you put anything together, do not miss any detail. At least it should be always be in the radar for us to make sure that we don't miss out on the details. And when you say in the detail, it will impact your design. Design could be on the product side, design could be on how you structure your people, design could be on how you even structure how you build to your client. All these are all tied together. And the second piece is method to the madness. When you start looking at the details so much, you introduce so much of chaos because you end up documenting everything. They don't start making sense. You still need to bring that method. You still need to make sure that there is some sense of our method structure, and if you can identify that structure, what works well, and which is where sometimes the people skills help, because you know what you got to play to the strengths of the people you have, and you need to structure. I mean, there is no silver bullet, unfortunately, in any project. So you got to work with the team you have, with the customer you have, and then you got to put together a team that sort of works really well to your benefit, but at the same time not impacting the customer.
You talked about devil is in the detail and method in this whole madness. So I'm wondering whether you have a certain thing that you can quote saying this is a method that we used. This is a method we used for structuring stuff, and is this what we use to capture? Is there something that you can help us out with there?
Sure. See, there are two pieces that we generally tend to do, which is, I mean, typical project management principles. But at the same time, what it always works, whatever we do, we try to put together a structured approach, have a plan in place. Now, the plan need not be like you don't have to be a PMP certified. All I'll always generally ask people is a plan is something where you can go and execute on, that you believe in, and that you need to be in a position to substantiate yourself, where you can. I mean, simple point is, what would you do on a day-to-day basis? If you are able to put that in a simple logical structure, more than enough. Now, there are many tools out there, but I always say keep it simple. So any simple, even if it is an Excel spreadsheet, have that structure in place. Have that even putting a plan is sort of a design to me, because that itself is an art. You got to make sure you need to know, have the plan, the people, what is it that you're executing, and then how is it that you go about executing. And then eventually comes down to the timelines. That's when pressure starts building up.
Right. So, you said earlier, you said that you, as a team, work on a problem to productize it. Right. That is the word that you use. So, is there a specific way that you approach making a product out of nothing or making a product out of a problem? Is there a specific approach your company follows?
See, there are different approaches. Say, for example, they call it OKRs, which are available, which is what key metrics. We have a very clear problem. Second is old school way of looking at your TAM and your SAM, total addressable market. Look at what is it the problem that you're trying to solve, build the product around it. But where I at least believe is in where we believe whatever problem we solve, is there a market out there? First is there a market, and is there a problem in the first place? And one thing is, which is when I started QuadCube, what I at least was clear on was there is a problem. There's a definite problem. Second is there a set of products that are out there that could, which already is there? We might have a problem, but still, if there are products out there, then why am I building it? There's no need for building it, right? So then, do you have a specific area where you can still differentiate yourself, and maybe is there a space that you can operate where other players don't exist? And which is where I was thinking, in the enterprise performance management space, for us there was no other player playing in that. Primary reason is it requires a bit more structure, a bit more planning, and in smaller companies you don't get that structure, and that's why it's hard to do planning and budgeting. For us, I knew it was a big challenge to do a profitability or a cash flow reporting even in a smaller. When I say smaller companies, you will be surprised to know companies of 100 crores of revenue, even to get a simple cash flow out, it's hard. it's so hard that bringing that structure in takes a while and takes that process. And I believe in doing both. Ensure that there is a market out there. Ensure that there are at least you believe in differentiating yourself and believe that you can go and execute on. And it's a long haul. And the last piece is it's nothing will happen overnight. It's a minimum 5 year journey.
Right. So, actually continuing that thread itself, so I saw that QuarkCube has built Quark Sheets, right? That is a tool that works something like MS Office, MS Excel, and then there's Google Docs, and the Power BI is already dealing with the visualization part of it. So, couple of questions. Okay, so one is, what motivated you to actually keep going? You said that there was some gap that you identified, but we would want to know more of that gap. Second question being, how does it feel like entering a red ocean environment? Because stuff like this is already there, and there is a market for it, but it already has been tapped on by the big players, right? And when once you did it, was there something that you were worried about, or as a new player, does one have to be worried about something specific?
Got it. So, at least from that perspective, it's a very great question, especially with regard when it comes to the red ocean and point. There are tons where we differentiate ourselves. At least that's what I say. Even though analytics, where the hardest part is, there is the finance and there is the analytics side, and sometimes there is always question of, hey, there are products out there that solve the analytics problem, and which is where the details sort of gets lost. For us, what we are on is on enterprise performance management. Analytics is just an output, is just a mechanism for us to take it to the market, because that is required. I mean, that is required, but we don't position ourselves as an analytics. We solve what we call as a planning and budgeting or a cash flow or specific data management related problem. Now, to you, coming back to your first point around Quark Sheets, I mean, it's a classic example of market driving us and customers driving us, where we end up building a something. We ended up actually, in fact, there is a genuine problem of building our initial set of products like Quark Plan, Quark Close, and the Quark Q platform. Then, when we rolled out with a couple of customers, the first question always is, and it's something which I've seen in the past as well, hey, all things said and done, can I have this in Excel? Simple question. Again, I mean, it's not that it's wrong. It's just that, I mean, if you think about it from their perspective, right? At the end of the day, that is all they use, and that's all they basically go and talk to customers, and it's easy for them, and it's so easy, it's ingrained into their methods. And even if you go and talk to a 10-year-old these days, everyone knows Excel, and it's so easy to use, and you can't ignore that fact. And one of the reasons we thought is, hey, why don't we build that connector? And there are companies who have built those connectors, but then we realized, hey, building a connector is great, but then what if I just use that as a mechanism to drive everything I do in the platform? So that is how the genesis of Quarksheets came into picture, where customers drove in that direction. But then we realized, hey, even though they drove for one purpose, maybe this actually could change how we approach some of the stuff we do, because it makes it all the more easier. Some of the stuff, because there is a lot of heavy lifting we have to do to our customers to train them. Now here with spreadsheet, it solves my other problem as well. I don't have to spend a lot of time training them. I just bring them a set of spreadsheet models. They don't have to do anything additional. They could still, everything they have, enterprise scale, enterprise security, all those are there, but still in the comforts of Excel. So it helped me solve both the problems.
Wow. We introduced a module called conflict of interest, which is basically this, right? So that have the cake and eat it too. So I think this is a classic example of how you want the sophisticated models and what goes on in a company and all that, but then it has to be so simple that you don't have to train them. Man, that's a holy grail, right? So if you solve that, and looks like you're doing that. Now, I remember that when I spoke to you, you said we have been incubated for 6 months. I thought you're just launching a company, but you're actually been incubated for 6 months. And then I said, are your products out? You said, this is the time to launch it. So now the question for launch is, even in our course, we have 3 iterations, and the third is when we say we are ready for launch. Now, how do we know when is a good time to launch? You took your 6 months time to build on stuff. So what are some thumb rules that we can follow, so to make sure that things are ready for putting it into the customer space and them breaking things apart?
Yeah, I generally use two jargons, but again, see, there is no silver bullet, unfortunately. Other one is progress over perfection. if we can, and again, that's the hardest part is what is progress that you don't know. What is progress from your perspective to what a customer not? It's a hard part. And where we believe sometimes as product managers, we think that, hey, I need everything to be there to go live and go ahead and get that launch done. But what I believe is in is, if as long as you do everything right in your product, if you have the journey map, if a customer does what you ask them to do in every sense of the way, and if that works, you are ready, at least the quasi ready to be live. Now the next piece is, which is where the hardest part in the product management side is, making sure all your edge cases work, making sure that where something you what your user is not supposed to do but they end up doing it, how do you recover from it? That whole journey around it, you got to make sure that those are all ring fence. And in SaaS world, in the product SaaS world, it's even more harder. How do you make sure it's all continues to upgrade, it continues to scale, it continues to be multi-cloud? And that's where the other sides come in. That is an evolution, and there is, unfortunately, even today, say for example, we have been here for 2.5 years since we built the product, it continues to evolve. It's not that it is the word I have an answer today saying this is the right way to do it. No, it will continue to evolve. But have a mechanism to judge yourself internally, and what is your initial pilot, what is your initial point where you are ready to launch, and then have it in phases out.
Actually, the phrase customer journey map is something that we use heavily in our course. So I'm very happy that you brought it yourself. I didn't prompt him. I didn't give a script. He brought it himself. So interesting that what my takeaway is that as long as it's bare bones should be there, enough that it covers the entire journey, and they shouldn't say that, oh my god, this is not working. So that brings me to the opposite question. We have sung praises of you, we have said great things about what I've done and what all now the other part is like, something drives you up the wall saying, oh god, what did I get myself into? Have there been moments like that in your journey where you said, man, why am I in this space? I should be doing something else. Were there some moments like that, and how did you overcome that part?
That has been there for the last 18 years, I would say. This very I'm hardcore electronics engineer, and sometimes I think that what is it that I'm doing? But again, I mean, jokes apart, at least on the Kharkiv journey, and that's what I say. If I remember one of my earlier questions, this is a long haul. One thing which I was keen on, in fact, I still remember my conversation when I left Huron was when I was talking to one of their executives as well. So, Venkat, why are you leaving? I mean, you amazing work. We were doing management consulting. Why is it that you want to change? And I believe is, at least I'm a person who focuses on foundations, where try to build the foundations, and then you always what your strengths are. You also need to know what you don't enjoy doing and what is it that not your strength is. I'm a foundations person. I'm a 0 to 100. Get something which is not there, but then there will always you need different sets of people to build the next stage. And building the foundation is hard, and it takes time. And one thing is, you got to do it, we got to change it. And what I believe my strengths are is, you got to evolve as you go, and most importantly, evolve as your customers need you to be evolved. Than what I think is needed, it's the customers who will drive our direction. And fortunately, we have customers today, and they are continuing to evolve our product.
Super nice. I believe Bala sir and you had discussed about when you were getting on the. So can you jump for the last question? We can edit this part out for the demo. I don't think we have more.
Oh,
questions.
we're done with questions.
Yeah, more or less. I mean, he's covered most of them already. So
I can go on. I mean,
yeah. Oh yeah, please do. I'm all out of questions.
No, because see, okay, I can come up with another question. Finance. Let's go to your core. Okay, that's one of the key things which is most talked about and least understood. At least from my side, right? So there may be many people here who are watching this video who will also agree with me. Most talked about, least understood. So in this arena, your customers and people you deal with have been doyens in managing finance, right? So they've been in this industry for a while, and here comes a guy who's saying that, guys, what you know is so much, but here's something that I can give that will make your life even better. And like, what's this guy going to do to that will make my life better? So how do you deal with this kind of a perception when you're dealing with particularly the C star O's, C X O's and all that, who have been there, done that, they know the journey very, very well, yet you're telling them that, dude, you still have a lot of work to do. How do you deal with that?
Absolutely, and I basically, I mean, which is where sometimes experience helps, and sometimes in terms of working with prior, what has really helped for me in the past is, at least in terms of all the customers that I worked with, and I always say this: never leave a customer until you have done everything for you. So all, I mean, even though you might change organizations, you move across, all my historical clients can come and talk about not Venkat as Huron, as a Quark but me, they will at least can come and talk about Venkat as an individual. I think that's what is most important. Empathize with your clients, and they need to know that you are committed to this journey. Okay, and the second part, which I think is because there is a problem out there, and I still see. I mean, even though we started Quark, we are not there yet to completely solve the problem, but I can sort of give a simple example. Today, if you are an individual, today, if you know, you all run, or we all run, for us to know, hey, am I going to be cash positive? What is it your cash position is? It's simple. It's a simple problem. And everyone runs their own individual finances. And more or less, everyone would know, hey, how I would be 3 months down the line, 4 months down the line. I have a consistent inflow, constant outflow. And majority of them, even if they might not have done the math, it's a simple what? In the brain, we will more or less know. But having said that, with enterprises, today, even if you go to any large enterprise, if they have to give you one projected forecasted cash flow or one projected forecasted output, hey, what would be my revenue in the next 3 months? It takes nearly a week of so many people coming together to get one simple revenue forecast or a cash flow forecast out. Second is the cash forecast. Third is the complexities come in where you have multiple organizations. Say, for example, some of the largest group companies, I still remember working with the company in Sri Lanka. They have almost 400 companies with holding structures so complex. Parent holding the child entity holding another child, and then has an eventual holding pattern to the parent again. So in those cases where it's so hard to even know what is going to be a projected financials, you got to have regulatory compliance and no. And good thing is no CXOs can come and say, I have solved that problem today, because they know that today there is no, unfortunately, nirvana in that space. And it's going to be hard. Regulations change, continue to get changed. For example, India, they brought in Ind AS as a new accounting standard. US GAAP, they are changing how they change the accounting regulations. And you will see a lot of these small companies, you would see issues on the tax side. You have heard about the Vodafone litigation case. All of those are regulatory. Regulations are also catching up. So when regulations change, your financials also need to reflect that, especially for corporate finance. While as individuals, it might not change a lot, because for us, it's all we need is whether are we positive or not. But for corporates, they got to make sure you are compliant from a regulation standpoint, but you also need to make sure that you are running a proper business, which is the we call as a management financials. Your management financials has one direction, your statutory financials, which is governance, has one direction, and both need to talk to each other. And unfortunately, there is no silver bullet today, which is fortunate for us, because there is always a problem for us to solve.
Awesome. I knew you'd say something like that. Now, actually, the intricacies in finance actually drives a lot of people up the wall. They're, even at a personal level, it's so difficult to comprehend what's coming in, what's going out. So, with large companies, it's going to be that much more a problem to sort out what's going on. How do we capture that? On top of that, there are every quarter they have to report out their earnings in a public traded company. Even private, they have to be sort of maintaining the records and all that. Which brings me to the core of this program itself, which is a BSc in data science. So, how do you deal with massive amounts of data? So, the big data, they talk about all that, but I'm more focused on the application. So, all these constructs are useful only when it's put into a real human scenario. So how does that, how have you included all that, the data crunching part and the modeling part, all that? How did you bring that about? How did you do that for this?
Perfect. So one of the fundamental tenets when I started the QuadCube was I got to solve four problems today. And if I don't have my platform solving them, I mean, I don't need front end interface. In fact, when we started the company, my goal was to address the underlying architecture when we started building it. In the sense that I need to be in a position to first is ensure that I produce management financials. That means that if you're a retail organization, I need to know what my product level profitability is. I need that much amount of financial and operational data. So it needs to have that fundamental hygiene. The second is then bring in your financial elements. One is the data side of it, and I've been fortunate that I started off as a hardcore analytics and data warehousing guy, then transitioned down to finance. So for me, the fundamentals on the analytics and data warehousing helped when we built it because that is what we wanted to make sure that whatever we do, it needs to scale. Scalability should not be an afterthought. Usability, user experience, we will evolve because there today, I mean, it's funny. That was an experience. We thought it was the best demo we had. We took a customer. First feedback from the customer was, "Hey, why is it black in color?" There was not even a question about functionality, user interface, any of that. We spent so much amount of time building what we did, but then we realized, hey, we missed something simple. So user experience is a journey, you got to evolve, but the data is something which we can't compromise. And fortunately, I think we have also we did one large pilot with a pretty large automobile manufacturing company in India. So I think we have at least demonstrated enough, and we are pretty confident that we have solved that problem. Now the question is, we still haven't addressed the usability problem, which we will get over the period of time.
Okay. Any particular data recipe constructs that are favorable for analyzing finance? Can you recall any of those, or you just go with whatever the model that works for you? How does that work?
So so when you say recipes, could you perhaps give me an example, or what exactly do you mean, Bala?
Usually, I mean, this is from hearsay from my students. Okay, so I'm no expert in data science. I'm just going to rattle off whatever I hear. So when you have a bunch of data coming in, it's either you train it with a model unknown. So that's the whole AI ML sort of angle. Another is I know a certain model. I start with that and I crunch numbers and improve the model. So do you have any such telltale recipes that you guys use?
Correct. And I think the good thing is now with the data science getting mature, we call it supervised and unsupervised learning, where you basically one is you would want you first go through a training process, and then you need to make sure that you have the ability to project out. The second is sometimes your historical data is so inaccurate, you still need to have to assume certain things and make a projections out. Those are fundamental tenets of whatever platforms we build, but there is a good and the bad. The good is it basically tells. In fact, one of the recent demos, probably in the demo, it would also show. In fact, that's one of the examples. Say what we do is when you do a forecasting, if you go and talk to an executive, when you say revenue forecasting, you basically start off with a painting, saying, or rather, sort of like a quick drawing, saying my revenue last year was say $1 million. Now next year I would be hitting say 1.5 million dollars, but with a growth that would look linear, a growth that could change here and there. Now that, how do you make that happen? That could be either a forecasting, it could be based on your historical data. That is fundamental to how we have built the platform. But the challenge always comes is how accurate is it? The accuracy of it depends on your historical data. Accuracy of it depends on what parameters you pass. And in the finance space, the data analytics space, unless your data volumes are so high, it will always be a starting point. It's not the end, but it will give you a very good starting point to have an initial baseline. Your forecast numbers would give you a very good baseline, but then you always need to bring in a business layer to make sure those forecasts continue to be evolved. And those supervised, unsupervised learnings are definitely part of the platform, and that is something we also recommend to at least have as an initial starting point.
I see. Okay, this is a personal favorite question of mine, which is in terms of marketing. Sukrat is the marketing guru in our midst. His degree was in that. But how do we go? Paid ads, paid advertising, or do we go word of mouth? What is your favorite? How do you pick that?
Super, good question. I mean, something I'm told, Venkat, you are very bad at. And in fact, I had one of the best marketing guys who was running my sales before. I mean, I believe in, I think companies go through that journey, right? Unless you have a good footprint, you should not be doing marketing. You need to have solid credentials, clients talking about you. That is a journey as you go through the company. We are in the first phase of the journey where we want to market ourselves, but at the same time, I would rather not go overboard, focus on what we have, ensure that they are successful, take it to a 3 year. I think for us internally was a 3 year plan where 3 years you have these 5 clients, ensure that they are successful, they can talk about you. Then you have use cases. Then that's when your actual marketing starts, where your use cases more or less gets an initial starting point for you to do whatever marketing we want to do. It could be a or the outreach marketing, it could be pure or the marketing through social media channels in any other way. For me, that is a journey. So right now, I would say we are very early in the curve. We are still in that word of mouth channel is what at least we prefer at the moment, given where we are.
Got it. Great. So, where we are tying you to the main course, your QuarkCube and what QuarkCube does to our course is the fact that, and this is where our original point of conversation was, that actually our students can build apps where they find gaps. Oh wow, that rhymes. Okay. So how do you, how can these people, what kind of problems can they pick up and build apps on your platform? We will of course follow it up with a demo, and all that good stuff will happen where you can walk us through what it means. But I want to start off with the basics of how do I find gaps in organizations, and how do I now link it to the app building process itself? How do we do that with your platforms?
Yeah, so with our launch of the Quark Sheets, and another piece which we'll cover in the demo as well, is with the launch of Quark Sheets, our goal is any problem that you feel is data driven can be solved through the platform. So, for example, one of the classic problems that my team is trying to address is, hey, what simple question for if you are a professional services organization, I have so much of currency flux. Today we are at 80 rupees a dollar, correct? It was like 75 rupees. And most of your professional services organizations are at a 15 to 18% margin. Or sometimes it could be 30% margin, but you're talking about EBITDA. If my currency exchange rate itself is fluctuating so much, how much is it going to impact my overall entire budgets that I've done for the year? So problems like this. Second is, hey, how should I be pricing my product? Simple question. What the simple question of start with one simple question. How should I price my product? Another one of my classic questions that came from our customers is, hey, we are in it's a BPO organization. They came to us. What is the price of a call? So it's a BPO. So basically, they do a lot of voice calls coming in. What is the price per call? Simple question, but it's so hard. Everything is data driven. So anything which could have a what or a why, and then comes down to the which, etc. But if you have a what and a why, phrase that problem. Platform should be able to help address that problem. And the good thing is, when you build those apps, all those are in Excel. So you start with Excel, you end with Excel, but eventually goes onto the platform.
Okay. So sounds very good. I mean, sounds interesting. We will definitely have student teams work on this. So we'll definitely hope that the demo will really help them in figuring out how is it that we can take a simple problem like that, what sounds like a simple problem, and they can actually formalize it, make it an app. I'm very glad that we can take a simple, not simple, but a tool that we are used to, Microsoft Excel. Many of us are trained on that. We have used it on an almost daily basis, many of us. So we can actually take that and start working with that. That sounds very good. So it is great having you, Venkat, for this conversation, and I'm sure students are from various backgrounds in our course. So people who are your full-time students to professionals who are working, startup owners, people who are thinking of starting up, and people who are taking it because they like educating themselves on topics like this are taking this course. So One last question to you, so that we wrap it up nicely, is from an employee you moved into an entrepreneur's role. So, what's your people who want to do this kind of a thing? What is your if you look back at your journey, what is it that you will pick and say, hey guys, you should do this? What is your gyan for them, knowledge for them?
The only gyan I would say is two things probably. Customers, listen to your customers. They absolutely don't worry whether, don't keep, I mean, I would say focus on value than volume. And most important thing is ensure that there is a good, I would say, how do I call the value from the customers talking. Do not underestimate that. That has so much of potential that could help you or continue your journey. And the last but not the least is do not give up. It's so easy given, I mean, there's so much of noise around in the last few years. You got to continue to focus on what you do, and there's enough opportunities. There's so many opportunities out there.
Great. Thank you so much. This is definitely valuable piece of advice from you for people who are aspiring to be, to lead organizations like yourselves and be in the thick of action while not getting drowned in all the noise. That is absolutely amazing piece of advice. Thank you so much for spending your valuable time with us and sharing, your nuggets of wisdom with our students. If you have any questions, anything to follow up on, you think some of what Venkat shared with us piques your curiosity, you want to ask some more, you want to continue the conversation, we'll leave his contact details. There you can contact him via email or I don't know if you're active on social media, but definitely on email. We will try to make the connection possible. Or you can participate in our live sessions. You've done that for NPTEL. You can do if you can repeat that for our sessions here. We'll be very, very happy. Thank you again for sharing this with us.